First, I want to share with you some research showing why trees are so beneficial to people and communities. I think you're going to hear some that will surprise you. Second, I want to show you what state forestry agencies, city planners, urban foresters and arborists, and healthcare professionals are doing right now to leverage the many benefits of trees. Research is a good foundation, but it's also helpful to see what's happening on the ground right now. And lastly, I'm going to provide you with some powerful tools that you can use to turn ideas into action, from making the case to decision makers, to building community consensus, to planting and caring for trees. Now let's hear from some of you. Stephanie, can you tell us why our viewers like trees?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got comments about shade cover, that bring birds into the area, the fact that they made people feel calm, childhood memories of climbing in trees, the fact that they produce oxygen, just frankly that they're beautiful. And there's several other ones, but I think that gives you a good sampling of why people like trees.
Thank you. Beauty, peace, shade, wildlife, countless benefits, just aesthetically. As I said, most people already like trees, and many know why they're beneficial. But when you start talking about spending money to plant new trees or care for existing ones, that's when you start hearing, yes, but today we're going to walk away with what you need to address those concerns. By the way, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end of each section. So let's talk about all the ways trees have always made life better and why they must play a part in building a healthier future. Let's start with the air we breathe. In fact, I want everyone to take a couple of deep breaths. Feels good, doesn't it? You just sent more oxygen to your brain. Of course, when we breathe, we also take in everything that's in the air, and that can include pollutants and tiny particles that our bodies don't like, which brings us back to trees. Trees help clean the air. Thanks to computer modeling, we can estimate the amount of pollutants such as carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, and particulate matter that trees help to filter out of the air. One study collected data from 55 US cities and estimated that trees remove 711,000 metric tons of these pollutants. Put into dollars, trees are performing an air cleaning service worth $3.8 billion. When people inhale fewer pollutants, this can translate into a reduction of diseases affecting our hearts and lungs. There are a number of studies that confirm this, but there's one that was conducted in 15 states between 1990 and 2007 that took an unusual approach. Rather than measure how people are affected when you add trees, researchers asked what happens to people when you take trees away. And here's something that does that. This industrious little pest is called the emerald ash borer, and this is what it does to trees. In this study, scientists analyzed how a decline in the population of ash trees due to the borer affected mortality rates in 15 states. They discovered that over the same period that the insects had killed millions of trees, there were 6,113 more deaths than normal due to respiratory diseases and 15,080 more deaths due to cardiovascular disease. The study concluded, this finding adds to the growing evidence that the natural environment provides major public health benefits. Again, several studies have confirmed the health benefits you see here, but two studies stand out. The first was in Japan in 2005 and 6, and the second was in Ann Arbor in 2014. In both cases, subjects were asked to have nature exposures, a fancy way of saying that participants took walks in the forest, a park, or some other tree-filled area for a prescribed time. Afterwards, their saliva was measured for levels of cortisol and amylase, our body's markers of stress. In both studies, researchers found decreases in these substances after the nature exposures, and also found that pulse rates and blood pressure decreased. If you've ever taken a walk in the woods or strolled under the shade of a large tree, and you felt just a little bit more relaxed and felt some of the tension leave your body, now you know why. In fact, the restoring qualities of trees and green spaces can be so powerful that simply looking at natural settings can be healing. This is Roger Ulrich, and his landmark study in the 70s is credited with launching a field known as healthcare design. The title of Ulrich's study says it all. In this study, patients recovering from surgery were examined to see if being assigned to a room with a view of a natural setting might speed their healing. 46 patients participated, with half assigned to rooms with windows looking out on a natural scene, and half with rooms looking out at a brick wall. Those looking at trees and green spaces had shorter hospital stays, received fewer negative comments in nurses' notes, and needed fewer painkillers than those looking at the wall. Not only can trees help healthy people, they can help people who are sick bounce back faster, with less pain, and with less anxiety than those without access to nature. That's powerful because that translates into cost-effective actions that impact quality of life. A study published in 2009 came to this conclusion about another benefit of tree exposures. Participants were children 7 to 12 diagnosed with ADHD. They were divided into 3 groups. One had a series of 20-minute park walks through city parks, and the other 2 groups had 20-minute walks through cityscapes. After each walk, the researchers read numbers to the children and asked them to repeat the numbers in reverse order, which is one way to measure concentration. In every test, the kids who had walked through the park performed better than the kids who had walked through a cityscape. For anyone who has ever spent time in a classroom, imagine applying these benefits for an entire school. And again, we're not talking about an expensive 7-day field trip into the wilderness to achieve mental clarity. We're talking about trees showing up in your life on a regular basis to create positive shifts in concentration and behavior. Finally, the benefit you see here is backed by a 2-year study focusing on childhood obesity. This study was conducted in Indiana and looked at the body mass index, or BMI, of children 3 to 16 who had been living at the same address for at least 2 years. The study compared the BMI of these children against the greenness of their neighborhoods, which means the amount of trees, plants, and grass the children have around them. As you might guess, the greener the area, the more chances the kids have to go outside and play, and that regular exercise resulted in lower BMIs. Or, as the report concludes, these findings support the exploration of the promotion and preservation of green space within neighborhoods as a means of addressing childhood obesity. There are many other benefits I could add to the list, and what you see here are just a few more that we won't have time to go into today. So I hope what you've seen so far has deepened your appreciation of the fact that trees have direct, quantifiable effects on human health, and that whenever you add trees or increase exposure to trees, communities reap benefits. Before we get to our next session, Are there any other questions or comments?
So you mentioned in your intro that you change yourself to trees at one point.
Just
Can
kidding.
you please tell us very quickly about that experience?
I used to go pretty often to just to promote the environment. And in addition, I have a somewhat activist past on other political issues, but I was using that as a metaphor and a reference to a bestseller of a couple of years ago that was all about the radicals who were working very hard to preserve the giant trees out west.
So there is a comment in the chat box about somebody, they live in a condo, and there is some concern from the management company about the very large trees that are, close to the building may provide a hazard. What are some thoughts about, how to balance the concerns about trees being a hazard and yet preserving the trees or, planting new trees? Maybe can you pull from your master gardener?
This presentation addresses that quite thoroughly. There is discussion of a software tool that provides a number of cost-benefit analysis. Concerns about trees falling on buildings or root damage by trees is very, very common. And the federal government has worked very hard to establish some tools that you can use to offset those risks with other benefits. But in addition, if you try to get the condo association to invest in their trees with proper arborist care, the risk is significantly lower. And I believe that insurance companies have recognized that well cared for trees significantly reduce the hazard.
That I remember from our master gardener training, there was a concept like, the right plant in the right place. And that includes the type of soil, its growing condition. I think it's so important for trees as well. If you're going to plant a tree that is going to grow a certain height or a certain width, and you plant it within 10 feet of the building, well, you're just really causing problems for future generations. So when you think about planting that tree, put it in the right place.
Yes.
And then, like you mentioned, maintaining it right. We have another question here. Is there a way to vet arborists?
Tend to use arborists that I have received high marks from through word of mouth. But the bottom line is that you need to go up on the arborist website and look on the bottom of the page and see if they have received proper certification from their professional organizations. That's the gold standard when it comes to arborists, because the professional organizations require continuing education, and through that continuing education, arborists learn about local conditions as well as national problems such as the emerald ash borer.
Master Gardener in Northern Virginia provides some resources for the public to understand, what are proper pruning techniques. And so, that's one way to arm yourself with knowledge about, what could or should be done with the trees. Sometimes when you hire the arborist, it's not only for their knowledge, but for their tools and their equipment. And so you can join that conversation with them with the knowledge that you can get from master gardeners. So
they're hard to find and far and few in between, but there are also independent arborists who do not provide arborist services, but only consult. And so their point of view is also helpful when there's controversy or issues, because they're only looking after your interests and the interests of the tree rather than trying to sell services.
I think we're ready to move on to the next section.
Let's look at some of the projects that are already leveraging the benefits of trees. We begin in Houston. A heat mapping study identified the residents of the Kashmir Gardens neighborhood as at risk from the urban heat island effect. So as part of Texas A&M Forest Services program, 600 mature trees were planted in Kashmir Gardens and another 500 seedlings distributed free to residents to plant. And here you can see the benefits that are projected over the next 20 years in terms of carbon removed from the atmosphere, air pollution eliminated, and stormwater that will be removed by additional trees. So here we have trees working to curb climate change, protect human health, and protect neighborhoods from flooding. Earlier, we talked about how trees can lower blood pressure and reduce heart disease. Our next stop is an on-the-ground example. The Pennsylvania Horticulture Society has been greening vacant lots and encouraging urban forestry across the state since 2004. And the Philadelphia Land Care Program is one example. Here you see a picture of one vacant lot before the society got involved. And here you can see how it looks today. The American Journal of Public Health asks community members in neighborhoods like this to participate in research looking at health benefits. They found that vacant lots that had been refurbished with trees, plants, and grass lowered heart rates by over 5 beats a minute when compared to unimproved lots. Next, we head south to Louisville, famous for producing baseball bats, but rapidly becoming infamous for poor air quality. Louisville is losing tens of thousands of trees each year. And one result is that the American Lung Association gave Louisville's air a failing grade due to increasing amounts of pollution. Fortunately, the University of Louisville is fighting back, and they've launched the Green Heart Initiative to plant trees in South Louisville and study the new trees' impact on heart disease and diabetes. Here's a short video that will tell you more.
In Louisville, we're facing a new epidemic. Our city is losing 54,000 trees each year. Even worse, the American Lung Association has given us an F for air quality every year since 2012. So at the University of Louisville, we've decided it's time to make some positive changes. And the Green Heart Project is our opportunity to establish roots in a healthier, greener city. Green Heart Louisville is a unique project. It's the first study to rigorously and scientifically assess the impact of green spaces on air quality and health in urban communities. By planting thousands of trees, shrubs, and grasses, we're hoping to discover whether an increase in neighborhood greenness decreases the level of air pollution in the area, reduces the risk for heart disease and diabetes, and promotes physical activity and social cohesion within the neighborhoods. To study how neighborhood greenness affects the health of residents, we're inviting adults from several South Louisville communities to join the HEAL study. We're measuring volunteers' health before and after planting new vegetation in the area to see how an increase in greenness affects lifestyle choices, social cohesion, and disease risk. We are also measuring the levels of air pollution in the area before and after planting to see whether trees and shrubs decrease the levels of air pollution and if this promoted outdoor activity and better health. Through the Green Heart Project, we hope to positively impact South Louisville and to develop a validated green print for designing a healthy city, one that could be replicated in other cities across the world in the future. To learn more about Green Heart or to get involved here in Louisville, visit greenheartlouisville.com. We're rooting for success.
Now let's go west to California, where the Los Angeles Parks Foundation has launched the Park Forest Initiative. Since 2021, the foundation has been planting mini forests, clusters of trees usually numbering around 20, in parks needing more trees and shade. Here you see a picture of trees that were about to be planted in the Hollenbach Recreation Center. The foundation has 4 interesting goals: to fight climate change, provide shade, replant trees that have been damaged or killed by wildfires, and create wildlife habitats. In 2017, the Texas Trees Foundation published the Urban Heat Island Management Study, which will hopefully become a roadmap for planting more trees in Greater Dallas. As you can see from this graphic, the report shows how planting 280,000 new trees can reduce temperatures in Dallas, which would yield multiple health benefits. The next program is called Park RX, and it's currently operating in 50 cities. Pharmacists there are encouraging healthcare and social service providers to write prescriptions of a kind for people to spend more time in natural settings. One physician who has embraced this approach is Dr. Daniel Porter at the Lone Star Family Health Center in Conroe, Texas. Dr. Porter writes prescriptions for some of his patients to spend more time walking, exercising, or playing sports in natural settings. And he also participates in a national program known as Walk with a Doc. I'll let Dr. Porter tell you more about that himself.
Star Family Health Center. We're a federally qualified health center out of Conroe, Texas. We serve 90,000 patient visits a year. And I try to write a prescription for nature instead of a prescription for drug. We have a printout that comes out of our electronic health software and choices for them in terms of local things that they can go explore. And then we try to get them to commit. Even if it's just once a week, please go spend an hour outside. A lot of mental health issues we care for out of this clinic too. Depression, anxiety. As a primary care doctor, you start wondering, what else can I offer my patient rather than just giving them the next pill? To create the first Nature Explorer classroom at a FQHC in the entire country. So that's one aspect, is the prescriptions. The other is that we try to do a walk with a doc program once a week. So we encourage our patients to join us at the local park. We're walking with a doc, and we start with a 10-minute presentation on a health topic, and then walk for about an hour. And you're walking with your doc. More and more data is showing that when we have access to natural space, when people spend more time outside, we get reductions in those diseases, and they get treated better. As the science progresses, that's what I buy into. That's what I'm bred to do, is to listen to science, and I want the proof, and I want evidence that it's working. So as a primary care physician, I'm trying to take care of the whole patient and the whole family for that sake. And that boosts the health of that patient and boosts the health of our community.
Now, if you're thinking it would be great if these cities could share what they're discovering and learn from each other, then you already understand the essential mission of Cities for Forests. The coalition of 82 cities is fostering peer-to-peer learning and connecting cities with technical support in urban forestry, climate crisis, water resources, and social equity. If you visit citiesforforest.com, you'll see a grid like this. With all participating cities, just click on your city if it's there, or a neighborhood city, and you can see what they're doing to leverage the benefits of trees. For example, let's say you want to see what's happening in Baltimore. You would see an update like this, which focuses on economic value of trees in Baltimore. That's a quick look at just a few of the initiatives. Are there any other questions about these examples?
Based on the slide that you just showed about Baltimore, and that they're having a goal of raising their tree canopy from one percentage to another, I think this is something that you worked on with the Arlington community. Can you describe that effort and what some of the challenges were and what some of the outcomes were?
I live in the Glen Carlin neighborhood. We're blessed by the fact that we're completely surrounded by a park, Glen Carlin Park. And when the county does their tree canopy studies, the fact that we're surrounded by the park overshadows the loss of trees within the neighborhood itself. Our loss of trees did not show up particularly dramatically in previous studies. The studies reporting on percentage of tree canopy in neighborhoods that was recently done did show a loss, but the loss of trees is probably greater because of the fact that we're surrounded by the park. So advocating for preserving trees on property has become a problem because the county keeps on saying that we still have all the trees that we had historically. That's not the case. In our jurisdiction, the county does these studies periodically. They are, in fact, a very useful tool for tree advocates to become familiar with.
And how do you work with your neighbors and the property owners to preserve and or plant more trees?
Actually, through the Civic Association, we formed a tree committee. It's pretty small, but they're a group of knowledgeable and devoted workers. And the first thing that we did is to do a tree tour. We went around with knowledgeable people regarding tree ID and identified the best samples of the different species that we have present here. And we made a tree tour. And we not only conducted this tree tour during a annual local festival, but we put it online so folks can download it, and it's still there. And one of our tree committee members actually did a little video highlighting these trees. And I think that has raised consciousness. And the second thing that we did actually doesn't have much to do with maintaining the trees themselves, but it has a lot to do with keeping them from dying of English ivy. And that is that we sponsored a 1 hour session with homeowners to help them remove the tree ivy on their trees and teach them how to remove it themselves. Removing ivy is a long-term project. We knew that we couldn't do every tree in the community forever and ever, but now we have equipped at a rate of about 13 homeowners a year. We've equipped our neighbors with the knowledge and the resources that they need to keep their trees free of ivy. And of course, these were wonderful visits, an opportunity to teach them other things about their trees and share the beauty that we all enjoy.
You mentioned this tree committee. So are you guys like fully staffed, or are you like in search of more volunteers? Because there's a lot of people on this call from Arlington and surrounding communities, and maybe they'd be interested in
Right.
joining you.
I would encourage them to form tree committees in their own neighborhoods. Yeah, we also had education tables and other activities. Independently of this committee, we also wrote appeals to developers who have bought houses in our neighborhood, asking them not to take trees down. That was somewhat less successful, but
Got it.
an effort. So I would really encourage people to get together with like-minded neighbors and share the joy.
And if somebody wanted to know the best practices that the Glen Carlin group did, could they reach out to you through the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia help desk? Would that be a way that they could get in contact with you?
Sure. And I would also encourage them to go up to the Glen Carlin neighborhood website and scroll down to Tree Committee and see the videos and the tree tour that is posted there.
That's great. We have another question. Is there anything with the county or the communities to provide any sort of monetary support, whether it be a tax credit or a subsidy for preserving trees? Are you aware of any of efforts to do that and any successes?
Arlington County has just instituted a storm water tax, an additional tax on individuals for the amount of space that is covered by buildings and impermeable surfaces. And they provide credits for new construction that adds impermeable surfaces and rain gardens and other amenities that alleviate stormwater runoff. Right now, they are not giving credits for existing rain gardens or existing trees, but when we talk to the people that are administering this program, they said that they would consider that in future years.
There's another question about a tree canopy, and I know that in this next section we are going to talk about that and resources on how to figure that out. So at this point, I'd like to just turn it back over to you to continue.
I hope what you've seen so far has whet your appetite to do something where you live and work. So for our final section, I want to share with you some tools. And here is a good place to start. Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives is an initiative working to increase awareness of the connection between trees and human health and get people like you to turn that awareness into action. The website offers articles and studies on the subject, case studies, and ways you can use trees to protect your own health as well as the health of the people around you. If you want to get a sense of how well your city is leveraging natural surroundings to protect human health, check out NatureQuant. You can enter your location right down to a street address, and NatureQuant will analyze data including the density of trees, air pollution, air temperature, proximity to parks, and other factors. And then it will put that data together to give you a nature score between 0 and 100. You can see here what the lowest and highest scores indicate. Here's an example using the street address of the Texas A&M Forest Service office in College Station. Another useful planning tool is iTree, launched in 2006 by the USDA Forest Service.
Trees grow high up into the sky. This does, however, cost money for the purchase, row set construction, planting, maintenance, and lastly, chopping. Trees to offer, such as carbon compensation, air filtration, air conditioning, shade, flood prevention, revenue generator, stress reliever, food factory, and insect hotel. iTree reveals its worth. iTree is objective, shedding light and insight on the financial benefits by means of science. How does it work? iTree is a software program designed for managing and arranging individual trees. It calculates canopy surfaces instead of the number of trees. iTree calculates the annual and future revenue and also sheds light on the unknown financial benefits. It can also be linked to existing management systems. iTree supports policy and management. iTree reveals good management and maintenance in terms of revenue and costs and provides a well-founded basis for the investment and size of growth sites and planting. It offers insight into optimal tree selection in relation to climate and environmental goals, as well as the green advantages within asset management. Tree managers. By using iTree, you can offer insight into the added value of trees toward residents, city councils, municipalities, and the asset managers. Would you also like to make use of the benefits iTree has to offer? Look at www.itreetools.org.
One useful tool you'll find there is the iTree planting calculator. If you're considering a tree planting project, you can use this calculator to project long-term benefits, such as how much carbon dioxide will be removed, the volume of stormwater that will be filtered, how much energy can be conserved, and more. Here you can see just a partial list of the benefits of trees, as well as the costs that iTree can quantify for you. For those who have concerns about the cost of planting and maintaining trees, or the damage that root systems can cause, This cost benefit analysis will be useful. This is the tool that I had in mind regarding the person who is discussing trees with their owners association. I imagine that you could do a survey of the number of trees that you have and get an estimate for their annual care, and get some answers in terms of these benefits. When you're considering planting new trees, another aspect is equity, or making sure you put trees in areas of greatest need to create balance. The picture you see here is of two neighborhoods in Baltimore, which shows very clearly what an inequitable distribution of trees can look like. Another site, Tree Equity Score, was developed by American Forests that works similarly to NatureQuant. You can enter your street address. The site will analyze existing tree canopies, population density, average income of residents, demographics, and then it will produce a number between 1 and 100. That's your tree equity score. Once again, here's an example using the street address of the Forest Service office in College Station. The last site is Vibrant Cities Lab. The site was created by the U.S. Forest Service, American Forests, and the National Association of Regional Councils, and it's designed for city managers, policymakers, and community leaders. The site can help you make the case for planting new trees and protecting existing ones. There is a step-by-step toolkit that you can use through every phase of the process, from assessment to caring for newly planted trees. Finally, if you want to dive into the research that shows connections between trees, forests, and human health, you can study the Dallas Urban Island Management Study, and also a report from the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, and another one from the World Resources Institute. And I add 2 additional resources to this list. When talking to decision makers at every level, one issue that constantly comes up is home value. In fact, data show that trees add an average 10% to home value, and you should make yourself familiar with this USDA research. Second, we've already discussed my second point, and that is the studies that many communities have done showing percentage of land covered by tree canopy over time. If you go to complain to community leaders about tree loss, it might be helpful for you to know what those studies say about your neighborhood. Any more questions?
Yes. Can you tell us about the trees that are near your house? You know, which ones do you really love and you're, trying to preserve, or are there any new ones that you've planted? Could you talk about that?
We work very hard to protect and enhance our trees. In fact, we have what Arlington County calls a specimen tree. There are only maybe 25, I would say, specimen trees so designated in the county. And unfortunately, those are protected from development. If we were to sell our home and somebody wanted to get rid of that tree, they would be sorely penalized with financial fines. So it's protected from damage with a series of fines, and it has that designation because it's more than 6 feet wide in diameter. It's an American elm, and as you probably know, American elms are fairly rare in the United States because of a blight many years ago. So that tree is our delight. It spans our entire property from one side to the other, and provides tree canopy for almost half of the property.
I didn't know about the specimen trees. Is there a list somewhere of where those are located?
They're photos of each tree is up on the Arlington County site.
Cool.
There are also other designations that do not have protection, but if you have a special tree, you can have it designated and listed on the county site as well.
If I wanted to plant a tree or trees on my own property, how would you recommend that I go about selecting a tree?
You really need to use the rule of thumb, right tree, right place, and consider the conditions that you're planting it in. If you have enough property for the amount of space that a large hardwood tree requires to spread out its roots, then you can plant that kind of tree. You also need to consider how much maintenance that you want to provide. The rule of thumb is that you need to water your trees for at least 2 years after planting. You can't just let it go and not water it except during droughts. From the get-go, you have to give some time and effort to it from the beginning. So take a good look at the area that you are considering for your tree and go from there. There are a number of really good databases that give you information by species. One that I use very often is the Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder. And at the beginning, you open up that website, and then there's a search engine that where you go to the plant you want to learn about, and on the opening screen for each species, it will give you the exact growing conditions that species needs. And the other database that is really, really good is the University of Florida tree database.
And I also know that either Virginia or the Arlington County has a list of native trees, information about whether they're evergreen or deciduous, and
Right.
how big they get and
Right.
stuff. And as somebody who loves to garden, I love to try different plants, and so planting native is not the only way to garden. But for beginners, I often recommend native choices because I think they're usually the easiest, right? Because they're already adapted to the area. And so once you get them established, it's, somewhat hands off.
A list like that is also available on the website plantnovanatives.org and from the State Forestry Service.
Perfect. Thanks. The question is about successful approaches to working with developers on preserving landscape or reestablishing landscape. I know some places in the country actually require developers to invest quite a lot into developing the landscape when they put in new communities.
If you express your interest to the city's zoning department to have those kinds of amenities from your developer from the get-go, you might be fortunate enough to have that written into the requirements that the developer must meet in order to get a building permit. So that is certainly one way to go. It varies extensively how localities enforce those requirements. And during the building process, you really have to have your eyes open to make sure that the developer does everything that's required.
And what I'm really getting from you is that people need to get involved. They can't sit back and think that somebody else is going to take care of it. They can't sit back and, complain about the government or the county inspectors for not doing their job. All the resources are stretched thin. And so it takes a village, right? It takes the community to get involved, to pay attention to these activities, to go to the meetings, to express their concerns. And if people are interested in change, they need to chain themselves to trees, right?
I would like to think that we have not reached the level where we have to chain ourselves to trees, but I'd like to keep it on a level where it can be resolved. But certainly everyone needs to participate in the dialogue about maintaining and enhancing our environment.
And you reviewed a number of resources on how to communicate to people that potentially don't know a lot about gardening, don't know a lot about trees, don't know a lot of the benefits. Of all of these different tools, is there one that's your favorite on how to communicate the benefit of trees?
I think that iTree certainly has the potential because it's fact-based and it talks to community leaders in terms that they are very concerned about: stormwater runoff, air pollution. The health issues have not been so much of a selling point here to date, but certainly that has the potential to raise awareness as well.
Great. So yeah, so if you're going to communicate with homeowner associations or community leaders, that would definitely be the tool to start with and familiarize yourself with. So thank you for that. iTree is the one that you recommend. So I think that covers all the questions. So back to you for final comments. And I think we have a opportunity for questions at the very end. If there are any more questions, please drop those into the chat.
So in closing, I want you to know that in 2023, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced an investment of $1 billion for planting and caring for urban and community forests. Hopefully, some of those funds will trickle down to our neighborhoods in the following ways. Here are some more details about those grants. Second, if you're looking for a partnership or other such opportunity, please use this email address to contact Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives Initiative. And please reach out to your local urban forestry programs. One final thought. Professor Antonio Damasio at USC has done research into how our brains work and how we make decisions. His most famous book is Descartes' Error. Descartes is most famous for 5 words: I think, therefore I am. All right, Damasio takes exception to this. He says that research proves that it should be, I feel and think, therefore I am. Human beings are not computers that take in information, process it objectively, and come out with entirely rational conclusions. Our emotions are always in play. So if we're going to convince more people to get involved, we have to acknowledge that research papers, sound science, and case studies are not going to do it by themselves. When it comes to building public support, it's a battle for hearts and minds. Winning hearts always comes first. If people don't care about something, it doesn't make it to their brain. So we have to help more people find their own emotional connections to trees, so they will think seriously about doing something. You can start today. Encourage others to take a walk in the park, get their hands dirty at local tree planting, leave the screens behind, and be in nature. When more people start choosing to be outside and experience the power of trees, then we're going to be successful in cultivating a sustainable, healthy, thriving future. and not just for our kids and future generations, but in our own lifetime. Thank you.